The house was silent in the way large houses often are, too controlled, too aware of themselves. Every sound seemed deliberate. Footsteps softened before reaching the marble corridor. Doors closed without force. Even breathing felt measured. At the center of the living room stood the man who owned the silence. He was known outside the house as a figure whose name was not spoken casually. Inside, his presence shaped behavior without effort. People adjusted their posture when he entered a room. Conversations thinned, eyes lowered. Respect was not requested, it was assumed. That morning, he did not raise his voice. He stood near the long dining table, one hand resting on its edge, his gaze fixed forward. The staff had been called in one by one. No explanation was given. They gathered at a distance, forming a loose line, careful not to stand too close to one another. At the far end of the room, the nanny stood alone. She wore the same neutral clothing she always did. Her hair was tied back neatly without ornament. Her hands were folded at her waist, fingers interlaced, still. She did not look around. She did not shift her weight. The accusation was delivered calmly. Money had gone missing. Not a small amount, but not enough to attract outside attention. It had been taken from a private drawer in the study, a space few people were allowed to enter. The timing narrowed the list of suspects quickly. The conclusion followed without hesitation. The nanny was named. There was no elaboration, no list of evidence, no demand for explanation. The words were spoken once, clearly, as if repetition would have been unnecessary. A pause followed. The staff did not look at her immediately. Some stared at the floor. Others kept their eyes forward, faces blank. A few glanced toward the nanny and then away again, as if contact itself might be inappropriate. The child was not present. The nanny did not respond. She did not lift her head. She did not deny the charge. Her expression did not change in any visible way. Only her fingers tightened slightly, the knuckles whitening for a brief moment before relaxing again. The man watched her carefully. Silence stretched. It was long enough to allow a defense, long enough to invite protest, long enough to appear generous. None came. Without reaction, the man straightened and turned away. The matter, to him, was settled. He issued brief instructions regarding household access and duties, his tone even, procedural. The meeting ended as quietly as it had begun. People discursed slowly, unsure whether they were expected to leave quickly or remain nearby. No one spoke. The nanny returned to work. She went first to the child's room. She straightened the bed with the same precision as always, smoothing the sheets, adjusting the pillows. She checked the window, then the temperature. Her movements were careful, practiced. Nothing suggested agitation. In the hallway, two staff members stood whispering. Their voices were low but not cautious enough. She had access, one said. She was trusted, the other replied. The nanny passed them without looking in their direction. Her steps did not slow. Her face remained neutral, as if the words had not reached her. By midday, the accusation had settled into the house like dust. It was not discussed openly, but it shaped behavior. Doors that had once been left open were now closed when the nanny approached. Objects were moved slightly after she passed, as if to confirm their position. Eyes followed her when she crossed a room, then quickly looked away. During lunch, she ate alone in the small service kitchen. She prepared her meal carefully, washing her hands longer than necessary, aligning the utensils before sitting. She took small bites, chewing slowly. When a staff member entered briefly to retrieve something, the room filled with an awkward stillness. The staff member did not greet her. The nanny nodded once, politely, and continued eating. Later, one of the associates arrived. He was not part of the household staff, but his presence carried weight. He spoke briefly with the boss in the study, the door closed. When he emerged, his expression was unreadable, but his gaze flicked toward the hallway where the nanny was passing with the child's laundry. The look was brief, assessing. By evening, the accusation had reached beyond the house. It traveled in fragments. A missing sum, a trusted employee, a disappointment. The story did not grow dramatic, it became efficient. Each retelling removed nuance, leaving only conclusion. The nanny felt it in subtle ways. A driver hesitated before opening the door for her. A guard delayed responding when she requested access to a supply room. No one confronted her. No one needed to. She continued her routine. When the child returned in the late afternoon, she greeted him the same way she always did. Her posture softened slightly, her movements became gentler. She knelt to his level, adjusted his jacket, checked his hands for cold. The child reached for her without hesitation. She lifted him carefully, holding him close, her expression unchanged. For a brief moment her eyes closed, not in relief but in containment. Then she opened them again and carried him inside. From the staircase above, the boss watched her. He observed without expression as she guided the child toward the playroom, speaking quietly, her voice low and steady. He did not hear the words, he did not need to. What he saw confirmed nothing. What he felt did not shift. As night settled, the house returned to its controlled quiet. The nanny stood alone in the hallway outside the child's room, listening to the steady rhythm of sleep from within. She adjusted the door until it was almost closed, leaving only a narrow gap. She remained there for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned and walked down the corridor, her footsteps soft, her figure receding into the shadows of the house that no longer trusted her. The silence followed her. Morning routines resumed without announcement. The household adjusted itself around the accusation, not through rules written down, but through habits quietly altered. Doors that once opened freely now required permission. Corridors were no longer crossed casually. The air carried an awareness that had not been there before. The nanny woke before sunrise, as she always did. She dressed in the dim light of her room, folding her blanket precisely before placing it at the foot of the bed. Her movements were economical, practiced through years of repetition. Nothing in her posture suggested urgency or fear. She moved as someone who understood that every action would now be noticed. In the kitchen, a small camera blinked faintly above the cabinets. It had been installed recently. She washed her hands, dried them, and prepared breakfast for the child. Ingredients were measured carefully. The pot was stirred slowly to prevent noise. When the meal was ready, she tasted it once, adjusted the seasoning, and turned off the stove. She wiped the counter clean, even in places she had not used. When a staff member entered, the nanny stepped aside without being asked. Her gaze remained neutral, unfocused. She waited until the space was empty again before continuing. Down the hallway, another camera had been mounted near the ceiling. It followed her as she walked. She did not look up. The child emerged from his room later than usual, hair still uncombed, eyes half closed. She knelt immediately, bringing herself to his level. She straightened his collar, wiped his face gently with a warm cloth, and guided him toward the table. The child leaned against her leg while eating. She remained still until he finished. Elsewhere in the house, new procedures were being enforced. Access logs were updated, storage rooms were checked twice daily, surveillance feeds were reviewed more frequently, though no one admitted to watching closely. The purpose was unspoken, but understood. She was being observed. The nanny adjusted without comment. She did not ask why a guard now accompanied her when she collected supplies. She did not question the delay when requesting items she had once retrieved herself. She accepted each change with a brief nod, a soft acknowledgement, and moved on. Her voice was rarely heard. When it was, it remained steady. Instructions to the child were given gently. Responses to staff were short and precise. She did not volunteer explanations. She did not attempt to justify herself. In the afternoon, the child was restless. He knocked over a small wooden toy, its pieces scattering across the floor. The sound echoed sharply in the quiet room. A guard standing near the doorway shifted his weight, watching. The nanny knelt immediately. She gathered the pieces one by one, checking each for damage before placing them back together. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately. She did not rush to calm the child. She allowed him to sit beside her, to help when he wanted, to stop when he lost interest. When the toy was reassembled, she set it aside and turned her attention fully to the child. The guard remained silent. Later, in the hallway, 2 staff members paused near a monitor displaying live camera feeds. The screens showed different corners of the house. One angle followed the nanny as she walked with the child toward the garden doors. "She hasn't tried to explain," one of them said quietly. The other did not respond. Outside, the nanny helped the child into his shoes. She tied the laces carefully, double-checking the knots. She placed a small jacket over his shoulders and buttoned it slowly. The child reached up, tugging at her sleeve. She stopped and waited. She listened to him without interrupting, her head slightly inclined. When he finished, she nodded once and guided him forward. From the upper balcony, the boss watched them cross the garden path. He stood still, hands behind his back, eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. He observed the rhythm of her steps, the way she kept the child close without holding him tightly, the way she paused before each turn, scanning the ground. Nothing appeared unusual, and yet nothing confirmed his certainty. Inside, the surveillance room hummed softly, screens flickered, timestamps rolled forward. Hours of footage played at accelerated speed, then slowed again. Most of it was uneventful, walking, cleaning, waiting, sitting quietly while the child napped. One clip was paused briefly. It showed the nanny seated on a small stool near the child's bed. The child slept. She did not move. Her hands rested on her lap. Her eyes were open, unfocused, fixed on nothing in particular. The footage continued. She remained there for over an hour. No attempt to access drawers, no glance toward the door, no restless movement. The clip was closed. Elsewhere, the nanny folded laundry in the late afternoon light. She aligned each garment carefully, smoothing wrinkles with her palms. When she finished, she stacked them evenly and carried them toward the storage room. A guard checked the contents before allowing her to enter. She waited without comment. Inside, she placed the clothes in their assigned spaces. She stepped back once finished, ensuring nothing had been misplaced. Before leaving, she paused, adjusted one folded shirt that did not belong to the child, and left it as she had found it. The camera caught the moment clearly. No one remarked on it. As evening approached, tension settled into the walls of the house. It did not announce itself. It lingered in the pauses between movements, in the way conversations ended abruptly when the nanny entered a room. She prepared dinner as instructed, following the updated list provided that morning. She served the child first, then stepped back. She did not eat until later, alone, standing near the counter this time, as if sitting might appear inappropriate. When she finished, she cleaned thoroughly. She washed the dishes twice. That night, after the child was asleep, the nanny remained in the hallway again, not as long as before, just long enough to ensure the room was quiet, the breathing steady. A camera captured her face in profile. Her expression was composed, tired but controlled. There was no visible distress, no sign of someone attempting to hide guilt. Down the corridor, a monitor reflected her image faintly. Someone watched. They did not yet understand what they were seeing, only that the picture did not match the story they had accepted. The nanny turned away from the child's door and walked back toward her room, her steps unhurried. Behind her, unseen, the camera continued to record. The changes were delivered without ceremony. A revised schedule was placed outside the nanny's room before dawn. It limited where she could go and when. Certain corridors were now restricted. Storage access required supervision. Breaks were shorter, fixed to exact minutes. Her pay was adjusted the same morning. The envelope she received was thinner. No explanation was attached. She opened it alone, counted the bills once, then folded them carefully and placed them back inside. She did not return the envelope. She did not ask who had made the decision. She adjusted. When she left her room, a guard waited at the end of the hallway. He did not greet her. He walked several steps behind, maintaining distance, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid conversation. In the kitchen, ingredients were already portioned. She was no longer trusted to decide quantities. She prepared the meal in silence, following the instructions exactly. When the stove burned slightly hotter than expected, she shifted the pot aside, preventing the food from scorching.
The motion was precise, practiced. A camera above the sink captured it. No one commented. As the day progressed, the house grew smaller around her. Doors that once opened with a quiet press of her palm now required keys she did not have. When she reached one such door with the child beside her, she stopped. She did not knock. She did not turn back immediately. She waited. A guard unlocked it from the other side, his movements deliberate. He did not meet her eyes as he stepped aside. She guided the child through first. The staff learned how to behave around her. They did not confront her. They did not insult her openly. Instead, they removed small courtesies. Meals were no longer announced. Requests were fulfilled slowly, if at all. Conversations ended when she approached, voices dropping into silence as if the air itself had shifted. One afternoon, she entered the service corridor to retrieve clean linens. A staff member was already there. The woman paused when she saw the nanny, her hands tightening around the stack she carried. For a brief moment, neither moved. Then the woman stepped aside sharply, pressing herself against the wall to allow space. She did not apologize. The nanny passed without looking at her, her shoulders steady, her gaze forward. The child noticed the change. He reached for the nanny more often. He followed her from room to room, even when instructed to stay behind. When a guard attempted to redirect him, the child resisted, clutching the nanny's sleeve with unexpected force. She did not pull away. She lowered herself to his level and waited until he released his grip on his own. Only then did she guide him gently, her hand light at his back. In the afternoons, they spent time in the small playroom near the back of the house. The room was monitored now. The camera angle was wide, capturing every corner. The nanny sat on the floor while the child played. She did not use her phone. She did not read. She watched him quietly, intervening only when necessary. When he fell and scraped his knee, she cleaned the wound carefully, her movements slow and deliberate, her face composed. The child leaned into her while she worked. She remained still until he settled. At dinner, she stood while others sat. She served the child, then stepped back, hands folded. When the boss entered the room, conversation thinned immediately. The nanny lowered her gaze slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, and remained silent. The boss did not look at her. After the meal, she waited for permission to clear the table. It came as a brief nod from one of the senior staff. She moved efficiently, stacking plates, wiping surfaces, restoring order. The work was familiar. The weight was not. That evening, she was instructed to move to a smaller room. It was closer to the service quarters, farther from the child's bedroom. The instruction was delivered through a note, unsigned. She packed her belongings without delay. There were few items: clothing folded neatly, a small personal notebook placed at the bottom of her bag. She paused once, holding the notebook, then returned it to the bag and closed the zipper. When she carried her belongings down the corridor, no one offered help. She passed the child's room. She slowed just slightly. The door was closed. She did not open it. In her new room, the light was dimmer. The walls were bare. A single camera sat above the doorframe, its lens angled downward. She placed her bag on the bed and stood still for a moment, taking in the space. Later, when the child was brought to her for the night routine, he hesitated at the doorway. The room was unfamiliar. She knelt and opened her arms slightly, not inviting, not demanding. The child stepped forward on his own and pressed into her shoulder. She held him carefully. From the hallway, a guard watched. From another floor, the boss reviewed updates on a tablet, access logs, timestamps, notes on compliance. Everything appeared orderly. The system was working. Back in the small room, the nanny sat on the edge of the bed after the child was returned to his own room. She did not lie down immediately. She rested her hands on her knees, her back straight, her breathing slow. The camera above her door recorded the moment. She did not look up. Outside, footsteps passed and faded. Doors closed. The house settled into its night rhythm. She remained seated, unmoving, as if waiting for something unnamed to arrive. The light stayed on.
The surveillance room remained unchanged. Screens lined the walls in precise rows, each showing a different corner of the house. Time codes advanced steadily. Most of the footage was routine. Corridors empty, doors opening and closing, staff passing through with practiced efficiency. The room was rarely occupied for long. Attention moved quickly, focused on incidents rather than patterns. One camera, installed months earlier, was positioned near the rear service entrance. It had been added after a minor delivery issue and never removed. Its angle was narrow, its image slightly dimmer than the others. It captured a section of the hallway leading to a small side door, one that opened toward the outer garden and the service road beyond. The footage from that camera accumulated quietly. Late one evening, long after the house had settled, an associate reviewed archived recordings while searching for a separate discrepancy. The playback speed was increased, hours compressed into minutes, movements blurred into repetition. Then the associate slowed the feed. The nanny appeared in frame. It was early morning, before most of the staff had arrived. She wore a plain jacket over her uniform, her hair tied back as usual. She moved carefully, checking the hallway before stepping closer to the side door. Her posture was not hurried, it was deliberate. She opened the door just enough to speak to someone outside. The audio was faint, nearly useless. The camera captured only fragments of motion. A hand extended from the other side. She accepted a small package, nodding once before closing the door. The associate paused the footage. He rewound it. The date stamp was clear. The following clip showed her again, days later. This time, she carried a small envelope. She waited near the same door, standing still until it opened. She passed the envelope through, her fingers lingering briefly before withdrawing. She remained where she was for a moment after the door closed, as if ensuring the exchange was complete. The associate leaned closer to the screen. There were no signs of concealment, no exaggerated caution. The movements were restrained, almost routine. He marked the time and continued searching. More clips appeared. Always brief, always early or late when the house was quiet. The nanny never lingered. She never carried anything large. Each exchange was controlled, minimal. In one recording, she checked her watch before stepping into frame. In another, she paused to adjust the strap of her bag, revealing its contents briefly, a folded stack of bills, warm at the edges. The associate did not yet understand what he was seeing. The footage remained buried. Elsewhere, the nanny continued her routine. The child developed a cough that lingered longer than expected. She monitored it closely, counting breaths while he slept, pressing the back of her forehead to his in the early hours. She recorded notes in her small notebook, writing carefully, tearing out pages and discarding them after reading them again. One afternoon, she requested permission to accompany the child on a short walk outside the property. The request was denied. She acknowledged the refusal without comment. That evening, after the child was asleep, she retrieved a small vial from her bag. She measured a dose carefully, checking the label twice before administering it. The child slept through it, his breathing steady. The camera in the room recorded everything. No one reviewed that footage. Days later, the hidden camera near the service entrance captured another exchange. This time, the person outside the door handed her a small bag. She opened it briefly, inspecting the contents under the dim light. Inside were medical supplies, items not listed on the household inventory. She nodded once and closed the bag. She did not smile. She returned inside and locked the door behind her. The associate reviewing archives marked the clip but did not escalate it. It did not match the original purpose of his search. It was unusual but not immediately alarming. The file was saved, labeled, and left among dozens of others. In the days that followed, the nanny's pay was reduced again. She accepted the envelope silently as before. Later that night, in her small room, she opened her bag and counted the remaining bills. The amount was modest. She separated a portion, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it carefully. The hidden camera recorded her leaving the room early the next morning.
She carried the envelope with her. The exchange happened quickly, no hesitation, no discussion. She returned inside, her bag lighter. Inside the surveillance room, the archive grew. The associate eventually compiled a short sequence of clips, intending to review them properly when time allowed. The footage was cued, then forgotten, as more immediate concerns demanded attention. The boss remained unaware. He reviewed reports daily. Compliance logs showed no violations. Movement restrictions were followed precisely. The nanny's behavior remained consistent, controlled, unremarkable. From his perspective, nothing had changed. One evening, as the child slept peacefully, the nanny sat beside the bed, her hands resting on her lap. She watched his chest rise and fall, counting silently. When satisfied, she adjusted the blanket and stood. As she turned toward the door, her sleeve slipped back slightly, revealing a thin bruise along her forearm, old, fading. She did not notice the camera. In the surveillance room, the clip continued to play, unnoticed among hours of quiet footage. The truth was present, complete in fragments, waiting without urgency. No one was looking at the right screen yet.
The discovery was unplanned. The boss entered the surveillance room late, after most of the house had gone quiet. He dismissed the guards stationed outside with a brief gesture and closed the door himself. The room responded as it always did, screens glowing steadily, machines humming softly, time advancing without concern. He was searching for confirmation. Another discrepancy had appeared in the financial logs, small, irregular, but persistent. He stood before the monitors, jacket still on, posture rigid. His attention moved quickly from screen to screen, fingers tapping against the edge of the console as footage advanced at increased speed. Hours passed in minutes. Most of what he saw matched expectation. Movement aligned with restriction. Compliance appeared complete. The system, as he understood it, was intact. Then one screen caught his attention. The angle was poor, the image slightly dim, a side corridor near the service entrance. He slowed the feed. The nanny appeared. He watched without changing expression as she approached the door, checked the hallway, and stepped closer. The interaction was brief. A hand from outside the frame, a package exchanged. No hesitation, no concealment beyond the location itself. He rewound the clip, watched again. His fingers stilled. He pulled up the archive. More entries surfaced, dates scattered across weeks, each interaction similar in form, consistent in timing. Early mornings, late nights, always restrained, always precise. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in focus. The footage continued. An envelope passed outward, a bag returned inward. In one clip, the contents were briefly visible. Medical supplies, items not logged, not approved, not purchased through his channels. He paused the screen. The room felt smaller. He removed his jacket and placed it carefully over the back of a chair. The action was deliberate, controlled. He resumed playback, this time watching without fast-forwarding. Another clip followed. The nanny, alone in her room, counting medicine, checking labels, measuring doses. He noted the time, cross-referenced it with medical logs. The medication was not listed. The child slept peacefully through it all. The boss exhaled slowly. He leaned back, hands resting on his thighs, gaze fixed on the screen though the clip had ended. The room's quiet pressed in around him, no longer neutral. The power he exercised daily was built on certainty. That certainty had begun to erode. He stood and walked the length of the room, stopping before a monitor that reflected his own image faintly. His face remained composed, but something in his eyes had shifted, an awareness he could not dismiss. He reviewed the access restrictions he had ordered, the pay reductions, the relocation of her room.
Each decision was justified at the time, supported by assumption, reinforced by silence. Now the silence meant something else. A message arrived on his tablet. Routine, staff update, nothing urgent. He did not open it. Instead, he returned to the footage. He isolated the clips, copied them into a separate folder, labeled it without description. He sat again. The question before him was not complex, it was heavy. To acknowledge the truth would require reversal, explanation, admission. It would weaken the image of control he maintained not just within the house, but beyond it. His authority depended on decisiveness, not correction. To suppress it would be easier. No one else had reviewed the footage thoroughly. The archive could remain buried. The narrative already accepted could stand unchallenged. He considered both paths without visible reaction. Outside the surveillance room, the house slept. In her small room, the nanny sat on the edge of the bed, removing her shoes carefully, aligning them beneath the chair. She moved slowly, conserving energy. Her face showed no expectation. She lay down without turning off the light. Back in the surveillance room, the boss remained seated, the paused image of the nanny on the screen before him. The timestamp glowed faintly, indifferent to consequence. He reached forward and rested his hand near the console controls. He did not press anything yet. The screen remained frozen. The decision had not been made. The meeting was arranged without announcement. No staff were gathered, no corridors were cleared. The house continued its routine as if nothing were about to change. Only a single message was delivered to the nanny, folded neatly and placed outside her door, instructing her to come to the study at a specific hour. She read it once. She arrived on time. The study was unchanged, orderly, restrained, designed to impose calm through symmetry. The boss stood near the window when she entered, his back to her, hands resting loosely at his sides. He did not ask her to sit. She did not sit. The door closed quietly behind her. What was said was brief. There was no raised voice, no formal apology, no attempt to explain intent or justify decisions already made. The facts were acknowledged in careful language, stripped of emotion. The surveillance footage was mentioned without detail. The transactions were referenced without accusation. The truth was no longer denied. The nanny listened without interruption. Her posture remained steady. Her hands were folded in front of her, as they had been since the first accusation. When the boss finished speaking, she did not respond immediately. She lowered her gaze slightly, not in submission but in acknowledgement that the conversation had reached its end. When she did speak, her voice was quiet. She did not defend herself. She did not describe her reasons. She did not mention sacrifice, exhaustion, or the weight of silence she had carried. She stated only what she intended to do. She would leave. The boss turned from the window then. For the first time, he looked directly at her. His expression did not change, but his stillness deepened. He did not argue. He did not attempt to negotiate. He nodded once, a restrained gesture of acceptance. Arrangements were made quickly. Compensation was offered beyond what had been withheld. It was calculated precisely, as if accuracy might serve as correction. She accepted it without comment, placing the envelope carefully into her bag. There was nothing further to discuss. She left the study alone. The house did not react. Staff continued moving through corridors, unaware of the decision that had been finalized behind closed doors. Orders were still followed, cameras still recorded, the structure remained intact. In her room, the nanny packed quietly. Her belongings were few, clothing folded with care, the notebook placed at the bottom of her bag again, unopened. She paused once, standing in the center of the room, scanning the bare walls as if committing the space to memory. The camera above the door recorded her final moments there. She did not look up. Before leaving, she went to the child's room. Permission had been granted. The child was awake, sitting on the bed, legs swinging slightly as he waited. When he saw her, his face brightened, unguarded. He reached for her immediately. She knelt and embraced him. She did not explain, she did not promise return. She held him until his grip loosened on its own, then smoothed his hair back gently. She met his eyes, steady and calm, and nodded once. He did not understand. She stood and stepped back. The child watched her leave the room, confusion settling slowly into his expression. He did not cry. He remained seated, waiting, as if expecting her to return. She did not. At the entrance hall, a driver waited with the door open. No one else was present. She stepped outside with her bag, pausing briefly at the threshold. The air beyond the house felt different, less controlled, less watchful. She inhaled once, then moved forward. The door closed behind her. From an upper floor, the boss stood alone, looking down into the courtyard through a narrow window. He did not follow. He did not signal. He remained still as the car pulled away, its sound gradually fading beyond the gates. The house resumed its quiet order. Later that evening, the boss returned to the surveillance room. The screens glowed as before, corridors empty, rooms settled. The system functioned flawlessly. He stood before the monitors, hands behind his back, reviewing nothing in particular. One screen displayed the child's room. The child lay awake, staring toward the door. The boss watched longer than necessary. He did not adjust the camera. He did not issue instructions. He stood until the image shifted naturally, the child turning away, sleep eventually taking hold. The footage continued. The power remained his. What did not return was the certainty with which he had exercised it. The house was quieter now, not in sound but in meaning, and in that quiet, something irretrievable remained absent.